Essay 250 Consideration of Laws and Regulation in an Audit of Financial Statement. First is the management responsibilities towards laws and regulation. Compliance of laws and regulation is a duty of management and TCWG and may be performed through monitoring legal requirements and ensuring that the operating procedures are designed to meet these requirements. Second, instituting and operating appropriate systems of internal control, and by developing, publicizing, and following a code of conduct in the entity. Ensuring employees are properly trained and understand the code of conduct. Monitoring compliance with code of conduct and take actions to discipline employees who fail to comply with it. And engaging legal advisors to assist in monitoring legal requirements. Maintaining a register of significant laws and regulation with which the entity has to comply. So 7 points: monitoring legal requirement, instituting and operating appropriate system of IC, developing, publicizing and following a code of conduct, ensuring employees are properly trained, monitoring of compliance with code of conduct, engaging legal advisors, and maintaining a register of significant L&R. Then comes the auditor's responsibilities. The basic responsibility of auditor is to obtain general understanding of legal and regulatory framework applicable to the entity, compliance by entity with that framework, and the specific responsibility with respect to legal to laws and regulations having direct effect on determination of material amount and disclosures in the financial statements. So with reference to this, the auditor is required to obtain SAAE, that is sufficient appropriate audit evidence. To ensure compliance, he can also obtain written representation that all instances of non-compliance or suspected non-compliances have been disclosed to the auditor. Then comes other laws and regulations that do not affect amount and disclosures in financial statements, but compliance with which may be fundamental to operating aspects of the entity. So with reference to this, the auditor can perform limited procedures like inquiring the management, inspecting correspondence with relevant licensing and regulatory authority, and to identify instances of non-compliances, auditor can simply obtain written representation with regard to this from the management. Then comes auditor procedure in case any non-compliance is identified or suspected. Then the auditor is required to obtain understanding of the act, circumstances in which it is occurred, evaluate the possible effects on financial statements, discuss with management and TCWG, obtain legal advice wherever required. Then comes the reporting responsibilities of the auditor. The auditor is required to report to three persons. First is to TCWG, then in the auditor report, and then to the regulatory and enforcement authorities if required by law. So when the auditor is required to report to TCWG, when matters are involving non-compliance, then obviously it has to be reported to TCWG, and if TCWG is itself involved, then communicate to higher level if any, otherwise obtain legal advice. And then comes reporting requirement in auditor report. Material effect on FS, then the audit report has to be qualified or adverse. When auditor is unable to conclude due to limitation imposed by management or either by circumstances, in both the two cases, the auditor has to consider the effect, and if the effect is material then the auditor is required to give qualified or disclaimer of opinion depending upon the situation. And then comes the regulatory and enforcement authorities if required by law. then auditor has to report to those authorities also. Indicators considered by auditor. What are the indicators considered by auditor for checking the non-compliance of laws and regulation? First, investigation by regulatory bodies, payment of fines and penalties, payment for unspecified services to consultants, related parties, etc., excessive sales commission or agents fees, purchasing at prices significantly above or below market price, unusual payment in cash, unusual payment towards legal and retainership, payment without proper exchange control documentation, existence of an information system which fails to provide an adequate audit trail or sufficient evidence, unauthorized transactions or improperly recorded transaction, adverse media comments. So these are few situation or indicators that is to be considered by auditor for while checking the non compliance or compliance of laws and regulation in an audit of financial statements. So this was essay 250, consideration of laws and regulation in audit of FS by the auditor.